So I realised while I was actually writing the script for this week's rant, it was going to be much longer than a standard rant video. So here is part 2. Okay, you may hear some noises going on from out there. The beach, as you can see, the sea is there. The beach is right in front of the apartment. But of course, you've got all the staff, and the Jamaican staff here are very friendly, but tend to be quite loud. That's just the way they are. Anyway, one of the things that really caught my eye going through the press releases, and it was a very small press release, I might add, which is why it caught my eye, why it didn't jump out immediately, and that was from a company called GPU Audio. And one of the features I like that GPU Audio are working on is the premise that we are underutilising our computers. And what do I mean by that? Well, on a computer you tend to have 2 different sets of core processor. You have the main core processor, which is the one that everybody gets really sort of excited about in terms of what runs the machine itself. And then you have a second core processor, which only people in the movie industry or in the music industry or any industry that's using large amounts of CPU might get very, very excited about. And that's the graphics card. And they're talking about how underutilized the graphics card is. And pretty much when you're running a DAW, you're using the main processor, but you're not using the graphics card very much at all. It's just displaying the screen of the DAW. If you're doing things like movie editing or you know, especially high definition stuff, you need a really good graphics card, and then the graphics card starts to come into its own. But if you're just processing music, it doesn't get used at all. And what they're talking about is actually tapping into this graphics card CPU to actually be usable for playing the VSTs. And in actual fact, if you think about this is a concept that Muse were promoting with the Muse Receptor. And I know everyone's going to jump on the bandwagon and say, don't see the. Some people say, I don't see the concept of Muse Receptor, and some people say, well, you know, Muse Receptor was a good idea, just wasn't promoted right. But the whole concept of Muse Receptor was to take the load off the CPU on the machine that you were using as your main workhorse. So effectively, the Muse became the sound generation and the VST player, and your computer was left to do the other stuff that you needed to do, and you weren't maxing the processor out trying to run VSTs. Excuse me, I'm sweating like it's coming out of fashion. So it's a kind of the same concept, but now they're actually looking at the machine. And I thought I'd give you an example of why this is interesting. So my new MacBook Pro that I've got, which is a second-hand machine I might add, is a 2019 version of the MacBook. It has a 2.4 gigahertz 8-core processor on it and 32 gig of RAM. But it also has an AMD Radeon Pro 550M graphics card with 8 gig of RAM. Okay, so I've got this graphics card with a separate processing unit and 8 gig of RAM that I'm just not using when I'm playing music. And while working with the DAW, the graphics card does nothing. Obviously, when I'm editing videos, it does something. Now, I've noticed that since I swapped from my old machine to this newer machine, and my old machine I really needed to swap from, and I was lent the money to buy this new machine, which I've got to pay back over the next X number of months. But what I've noticed on the new machine is that video editing is so much quicker. And that's one of 2 reasons that when I started this channel, my camera setup and my video editing setup were completely different to what they are now. In fact, I'm actually shooting videos at much higher definition with many sound sources, and putting that all together and editing that whole stuff in one hit was taxing the older machine. This new machine seems to just plow through it quite quickly. It's a much higher spec in terms of it's got double the memory, double the graphics card, double the graphics card speed. I'm not going to go on. But the graphics card on this machine comes with, wait for it, 1536 cores, because it doesn't really work the same way as the main processor does. It works on being able to shunt data through what it calls pipes. And it runs on a 128-bit architecture. Now, we are running, or I am running on my Mac, a 64-bit architecture. So actually the graphics card is running four times as quick as the, is it 4 times or 8 times? 4 times. 4 times as quick as the main processor. And what they were saying is that if they can get this technology out into the market, how it's going to work, they can run VSTs with virtually zero latency on your computer while freeing up the main processor to do other stuff. Now that's pretty cool, and I think that deserved a shout out, because that's the kind of tech that really is going to come in handy, definitely for well, maybe for studios, but studios can tend, or big studios can tend to afford to throw money at the problem. But the sort of mid-ware producer, singer, songwriter can't afford to throw money at the problem. And this is another question, another argument I've had on the channel with somebody about, you know, is something too expensive? Is it out of the price range of the people that really you want to buy it? Anyway, that's a different question. But this type of thing will allow a reasonable computer to all of a sudden become a supercomputer. Anyway, I thought it was worth a shout out.
Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon.
This was another one of those interesting things I saw. Not necessarily about the synth, I might add. Okay, this synth was called the Nina, and it's from Melbourne Instruments, and it's not a keyboard, it's a module. Now I found this to be quite quirky when I was going through the press release, and the reason why I found it to be quirky is because there's a specific feature that it has. The unit itself is a 12-voice analog poly synth module. But what I found quirky is the fact that when you change a patch, all the knobs and faders on the machine automatically adjust themselves to where they should be to create the patch you just selected. So if you go through patches, these things are going doot, 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 all the time. If you scan through the patch, but if you just select one, dial in a patch, it will set you up exactly where you are. And this is one of my biggest bugbears on my Kronos, actually. Not so much on the Oasis, because the Oasis had lights around things that kind of told you whether the knob was in the right position for the patch that you selected. But on the Kronos, you could not tell whether the knobs and faders and buttons are actually in the right position for the patch you've set. And I find it increasingly annoying. It's not increasingly, it's just annoying, I suppose. Because you move a knob, and all of a sudden the sound completely changes, because where the patch position and where the knob position are quite wide in distance. Anyway, apparently this motorized technology they've installed in this Nina product is from the drone industry. It's the sort of servos they use to drive the motors on the drones, which I thought was really interesting. But I guess it's kind of a logical place to get the technology from, because obviously in anything that flies, one of the key things is weight. So the lighter the vehicle is, the less propulsion you need to get it off the ground and keep it in the air, and the more battery life you have if it's a drone, for argument's sake. So, you know, it makes sense that these things are light, and that's where this came from. You know, I sort of look at this and say, okay, well, why aren't, you know, the Kronoses, the Phantoms, and the Montages installing this technology into their keyboards? And I suppose the reason why is because us keyboard players complain like buggery about how heavy these keyboards are now, without adding a whole bunch of motorised faders to them that's going to make them even heavier. But then again, I say, blah, it's just weight. So Novation have launched the Launchkey 88 as their flagship MIDI controller. Of course, it completely integrates with the whole Novation range of products, which is good. The product comes with a semi-weighted key action. Now, I'm kind of looking for another MIDI controller for the studio, and I'll tell you the reason why. Is that most of my 88 key MIDI controllers are actually weighted action. And I wanted that because I like playing a weighted action keyboard. But sometimes I want to play an unweighted action keyboard if I'm trying to control a synth. And a lot of synths, as you well know, don't come with 88 keys. Most synths come with 61 keys. Maybe if you're lucky you might get 76, but the bulk standard synth at the moment seems to be coming with 61. I've actually seen a couple that have been released potentially to market that are going to actually come with 49. I don't understand that logic, because you're going to have to plug it into a master keyboard to get the additional octaves. But maybe you're not meant to get the additional octaves. Anyway, I'm interested in the key bed, and I think this will be one where I probably, when I get back from Jamaica, will make a trip to one of the toy shops to give this a go and see what I feel about the controller itself. As I've said in the past, I've kind of used my D70 as the controller in this area because it's 76 key synth action keyboard, and it's worked really well for me. But I'm kind of thinking with the new studio layout, when eventually the new studio comes, that having a semi-weighted or a synth action 88 key keyboard will be great, and preferably something that doesn't feel completely plastic, which is what a lot of these MIDI controllers feel to me. They don't feel like they're giving you enough resistance for you to be able to feel that you're playing with the right velocity and feel. But that's just me. I basically conclude from everything I've seen and read, and the reason why I didn't do the video this morning, although that would have been afternoon when I was if I was at home, so this is now tomorrow if I'm at home, if that makes any sense, is because I was waiting for kind of a lot of roundup stuff from NAMM to sort of come through. So there's a couple of blogs that were sort of almost releasing product on the hour. You know, people were announcing stuff. But I conclude from everything I've seen that this NAMM will not go down in history as a complete groundbreaker. But let's be thankful that NAMM has actually happened, because it's been suspended for nearly 2 years. You know, the 2020 NAMM was happening, but people weren't going to it because that was the start of the COVID outbreak. The summer NAMM was cancelled, winter 2021 was cancelled, summer 2021 was cancelled, and the winter is actually happening in summer in 2022. So let's just be thankful that it's actually happened in 2022, and some manufacturers have managed to get there and talk about product. Now, a number of manufacturers have chosen not to attend this year's NAMM. Sequential posted last week that they weren't going to attend in respect to the fact that Dave Smith had passed, which is fair enough. Dave Smith was an integral part of Sequential, even though he had sold the company to Focusrite a couple of years back. But he's still fully at the helm. I suspect others were of the opinion that they had nothing to show, no new product. And why would you go to NAMM if you weren't going to promote any new products? At the end of the day, going to a trade show is a very expensive process. You've got to have resources, you've got to send your people there, you've got to employ people to man your stand, you've got to rent the space in the exhibition hall, you've got to build your stand, or stage it, whatever it is you're going to do. You need to put that in place. And then you've got the logistics of getting your staging and your product there, plus everything else that goes with it. Then you've got to make sure that you've got the right people endorsing your product if you're going to launch a new product, and you've got the right influencers in the crowd to make sure that your product gets out on all the relevant platforms. And finally, excuse me, you've got to pay, you've got to feed them all. It's not a cheap exercise going to one of these trade exhibitions. So if you've got no new message, why go? And I suspect that's the reason why a number of people just haven't turned up. And it makes a lot of sense. So maybe NAMM 2023 will start seeing a lot of new product launch. I feel this may set a trend for other shows in Europe and the rest of and the US and the rest of the world in terms of trade shows. I don't think we're going to have massive product launches this year, purely because manufacturers are struggling to get hold of parts. So those that are launching are people that can guarantee supply. And even if you look back at something like the Geno X, for argument's sake, that launched a few weeks ago, that's still in pre-order. So even Roland haven't confirmed they've got all the parts. Can Oberheim meet their OBX8 supply demands? Don't know. But that is reality. Anyway, for now, let me just say, live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.